For those of you who don't know, I don't know if I'm eating into my time, but governor-wise, the Alliance has hosted a series of webinars that have been available to the public. I think you've done 4 over the last year and a half, maybe 5, which is an incredible service to the education community because it's getting information out there. And I think one of the most important things that we're encountering as we build on a very rapid timeline these assessments to match the Common Core is that there's sort of a sense out there that we're moving so quickly that people don't have enough information. And so the work that you've done to get information out there is really making a difference. Okay, now my time will start. The Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers is the non-sexy long name that has been shortened to PARCC. Really the emphasis there is important though, and it's on readiness, preparing all students for success in college and careers. I'm going to go very rapidly through only 13 slides, and then there'll be time, as the governor said, for questions after Joe speaks. And Joe and I were looking at each other. We switch off a lot, and it is actually my turn to go first because Joe went first 2 weeks ago. We do this a lot together, so it's we're at the point where we can finish each other's sentences. The PARCC Consortium is made up of 23 states. 19 of those states serve on the governing board. And it's always important to start here because, as the governor said, this is a state-driven effort. Massachusetts currently serves as the chair of the governing board, Commissioner Chester. Florida and Indiana have equal parts responsibility for moving procurement out and doing solicitations. And so there's this shared responsibility of both financial responsibility and decision-making and governance. And I just want to take a moment to thank Tony Bennett for his leadership on the PARCC Governing Board from its inception. He's been an incredible voice for pushing for high-quality rigor and pushing on that timeline to get us there. Quickly about the PARCC goals. I mean, first and foremost is to create excellent assessments that really turn on its head this idea of teaching to the test that Governor Bush was referring to earlier. We don't want a test-driven accountability system in the sense that a low-level test is what's pushing is pushing and being the driver behind the work of teachers. We want an excellent assessment that isn't about teaching to the test, but is about measuring student learning in valuable content and skills that are the most important for success when they get to college and careers. We're about building a pathway for all students, not just the select few, but really all. It's about an equity agenda. The PARCC Consortium also places a premium on supporting educators. Assessment shouldn't be a gotcha. It should be a very seamless part of a student's education. And as the governor said, it's going to be a 21st century technology-based assessment, not for the sake of doing cool things with technology, but because that's a better way to access some of the knowledge and skills in the standards themselves. And so when it's important for students to take assessments through technology, items will be innovative and really try to target those conceptual skills, those deep understandings, the kind of deeper knowledge that the governor referred to that can best be assessed by through technology. And ultimately, the goal of both consortia is to develop assessments that are sustainable and affordable in the long term. We don't want to get to the point where we've built an absolutely phenomenal assessment, but it's too fancy and nobody can afford to do it. This has to be a sustainable, feasible effort. So really briefly, you've heard a lot about the Common Core, so I'm not going to go into depth here, but this slide really shows some of the key areas of emphasis and shifts from typical state standards to where we are with the Common Core. And it's important to start here because these are the areas that the PARCC assessment is really going to place a premium on and measure. The idea in mathematics of focus, going deep at each grade level on the most important topics in that grade, a balance between procedural fluency and concepts and skills, and then really pushing on application through reasoning and modeling. Different kinds of assessment that require different kinds of items, performance-based items, extended tasks. In English language arts literacy, you'll see a balance of literary and informational text, an emphasis on argument and informative and explanatory writing, the kinds of things students actually are asked to do when they go to college or out in the world of work, and then literacy standards that really cut across the curriculum and don't just find themselves at home in an English class, but really are part of the work of teachers across the curriculum. PARCC is building a K-12 system. There'll be K-2 formative tools, diagnostic assessments that run through the middle and elementary grades, and then high school assessments in English language arts in 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade to track the years of students' progress. And then in mathematics, in order to allow for state flexibility and district flexibility, PARCC is developing 2 sequences. The first, a traditional sequence, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, the kind of traditional course sequences. And then in the other case, a more integrated, internationally focused sequence of Math 1, Math 2, Math 3. That's important because this isn't about mandating a curriculum. This is about measuring content and skills that can be packaged and taught in different ways. The goal, regardless of the trajectory, of course, is to make sure students are prepared to enter directly into first-year credit-bearing courses without the need for remediation, and to provide a clear vision of what that target is, so that kids aren't getting confusing messages by the myriad tests that they take. So very quickly about the PARCC design, I see the governor checking his watch, so I'm going to move. 4 components, a diagnostic component that I mentioned that will be very flexible and really available to teachers as students are ready to take them. A mid-year performance assessment that allows students and teachers to get practice doing long, extended tasks that focus on product. So think about application, not just rote memorization, but really applying knowledge and skills. Then you'll see 2 summative components that together will comprise a summative score. The first one is a performance-based assessment. And again, an extended task that really asks students to apply what they've learned, not just regurgitate fact, and to produce something in English language arts, literacy, to produce a piece of writing based on multiple sources and using evidence to make a claim or build an argument. In mathematics, extended mathematics tasks with multi-steps. And at the end of the year, an innovative computer-based short answer and selected response component that is turns around scores very, very quickly so that students, parents, and teachers can have results back before the end of the year. I'm going to skip into the timeline. I have a lot of information about why technology, and I think I'm going to talk about this and then go to the timeline. Because this is sort of one of the tenets of the Race to the Top assessment competition. We are building next generation 21st century assessments and building those to be delivered in an online environment for a number of reasons. First of all, because of the kinds of items that can be created. I talked a little bit about how the kinds of innovative items can better measure the standards and get at content and skills. They can also really capture student responses in a different way by allowing students to write or graph things in mathematics. They also allow important accommodations to be built into an assessment system so that students with special needs can have those actually built in on the front end of an assessment rather than to be retrofitted at the back end, making it much more efficient, affordable, and actually a better experience for students. There's obviously an ease in terms of administration. We hope that using technology will drive down costs, and it will create a much more efficient process and a faster process for scoring and getting results and reports back into teachers' hands as quickly as possible. PARCC, just like Smarter Balanced, is committed to promoting student access, and we can talk about that more if you all have questions. Of course, these assessments are being built intentionally to be used for a myriad of accountability purposes, including school and district effectiveness, educator effectiveness, and of course, district and state level results. We're also building in the opportunity to make comparisons with other countries. You heard that come across in Governor Bush's remarks about PISA, really thinking about this not just as a national picture, but how are our students stacking up to students in other countries. And then, of course, the important function of serving as an anchor directly into credit-bearing courses on post-secondary campuses. So here's a very high-level slide about some major milestones that we've accomplished. PARCC and Smarter Balanced are almost exactly 2 years into a 4-year development cycle that is a race to keep up. PARCC has done, and we've done a lot of work, and we have a lot of work still to go. In the spring of 2012, we released preliminary technology specifications. We'll come back around in January and release a second round of technology specifications to send districts and schools clear messages about what technology they're going to need to have in order to be able to deliver the assessment. This summer, in a very exciting thing, PARCC was able to release 23 item prototypes that have been in development for over a year, and you'd think that, I mean, that sounds like a long time, but in fact, the kinds of things we're asking of this assessment are going to be so different that it took a while to get these examples right, because we wanted to show really beautiful examples, not more of the same. There's been a lot of work this fall around determining the college and career ready definition and how many performance levels this assessment will have. And just a note about that, typical assessments have 3 or 4 performance levels. There are a few state assessments that have 5. PARCC, because it will have such a long extension of score points, will be able to really provide very detailed information back to parents and teachers. So there'll be 5 performance levels. That might be too weedy, but rather than just basic, proficient, and advanced, you'll have 5 levels in order to really provide good information, particularly about students at the low end and the high end. Item tryouts will occur on schedule in spring 2013. Those are kind of small sample, really going to test out the different and unique and innovative item types. There'll be full field testing in the fall of the spring of 2014. And then in the school year 2014-15, the assessment will be ready to go live. The diagnostic tools will come online in the fall, followed by the first administration of the PARCC assessments at the winter term, and then again in the spring term. After that first full administration, PARCC leaders from the PARCC Governing Board, as well as their partners in higher education, will work together to set what are known as the cut scores, which really establish the performance levels along the way and become part of the student report and, frankly, the public understanding of how students are going to be doing. So that's when we'll be looking to report results for the first time. I was 12 minutes, not too bad, and I will turn it over to Joe.
And incidentally, Joe, Laura started a worthwhile policy. Laudatory remarks about the moderator are not counted against your time. So next we'll hear from Joe Wilhoft, Executive Director for Smarter Balanced.
What if I have good things to say about Laura? Does that count against my time? Yes, it does. Oh, gosh. Okay, then I won't say anything good about Laura. Yes, we're in our terrible twos. It's a 4-year project. We're 2 years into it, so we're learning to crawl. We're irritable right now. We're kind of, if we don't get our way, we really get upset, just like a typical 2-year-old, and like a typical 4-year project that now the end is coming close to us. Uh-oh. Now, it won't count against me if I have to change the slide here. What am I doing?
Technology. In action.
Thank you. So Smarter Balanced by design is a system of assessments that is designed to do what we can with based in the firm belief that information can actually help teaching and learning, that we can contribute to better teaching and learning by providing quality information to teachers, principals, parents, students. So it's a 3-pronged approach. At the very top of that triangle is a summative assessment. It happens at the end of the year. It consists of a performance task section and a computer adaptive testing section. The computer adaptive test is unique to Smarter Balanced, and it adjusts the test as the student is taking the test to find the items, the test items that are right at the student's level of performance. So it's a very efficient system and moves the student very quickly through an awful lot of content. On the lower right-hand side is something we call our interim component. These are items and tasks that are scaled to exactly the same scale as the summative assessment. The difference is they're non-secure. The summative assessment, because it's used for accountability, needs to have secure items because we do make accountability decisions on the basis of that test. But the interim assessment is open for teachers, open for students, so they can be given during the year. Students can see how they're progressing. Teachers can see how their students are progressing. Teachers can get a sense of the kinds of questions we're asking on the summative assessment and get insight into the kinds of teaching that they ought to be engaged in to move students forward on the Common Core. Finally, on the lower left-hand column or area are these formative resources. About a third of teachers' time is spent in assessment activities, and that's not just giving our kinds of tests. That's doing things like making the Friday test, grading it, scoring it, gradebook activities, giving grades to students, making the midterm exams, so forth and so on. About a third of their time. How much time do teachers have learning how to do that well? Hardly none. And so we see this as an opportunity to help teachers, help the teaching force and the pre-service force learn how to assess the Common Core on a day-to-day basis in their classroom. Help them with those kinds of resources and practices. So that's our overall model. I'm going to spend what little time I have making 2 points. The first point illustrates why these assessments will be different than what you're currently doing. There's something, these are the claims that we have in English language arts and literacy, not unlike the PARCC claims for reading, writing, speaking, listening, and research. And in mathematics, oh, this thing is animated, okay. Concepts and procedures, the stuff of mathematics, and then problem solving, reasoning, and modeling and data analysis. Well, what does that all mean? Well, here's an illustration, just in a very small print here, I know. These are some of the 11th grade, what we call assessment targets. We will build test questions around these targets. Number sense rational exponents, number sense rational and irrational numbers, using units, and so forth and so on. So this is just a snapshot of some of what's going on in 11th grade. Here's all of what's going on in 11th grade math. And those green boxes, those represent something called depth of knowledge. The depth of knowledge is how deep is the understanding. Is it something you've just memorized? That's a low-level depth. Is it something you have to think about, you have to analyze, you have to bring some new solutions to come up to solve a problem? That's what mathematics really is in everyday life. And so those green boxes off on the right are the deeper depth of knowledge, the deeper understanding that we're expecting of students. Now, for 11th grade math, we have about 9% of our targets are in that high level depth of knowledge. A little bit less than a quarter are in DOK3, the third level. I can guarantee you there aren't any state assessments right now that go into that level 4 depth of knowledge. And very few go into depth of knowledge 3. Most state assessments right now are just about facts. What do you need to know? What can you memorize? What can you choose the bubble and get the right answer? Overall, this is what this looks like for 4th grade, 8th grade, and high school, or those rows and the columns you can see it displayed right there. This particular slide, although the exact numbers are unique to Smarter Balanced, the overall picture is something that both of these consortia share. We are both assessing things at a different order of magnitude than has been done so far. And that's because the Common Core is deeper than most state standards are right now. So it's really taking us to another level. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I'd like to make very briefly is just some recent and upcoming developments. First of all, in early October, we released some sample items and tasks. It's about 50 items and tasks that you have access to. It's an online tool. It uses actually a test delivery system that is similar to what students will actually use when they take the test. So it's very interactive. I invite you to go there. My last slide is our website, so you can see how to find us. In the middle of November, just before Thanksgiving, we formally adopted something called our blueprint. You know, your blueprint, if you're going to build a house, is not only where is the living room and where are the bathrooms, but how big are they? You do not need a 20-foot by 20-foot bathroom and a 7-foot by 6-foot living room. You know, you have to kind of figure these things out, and how are they connected? Well, a test blueprint's the same. How much of the test is given to reading? How much of the test is writing? How much of the test is research? How are they connected? How many test questions do we have here? And so forth and so on. So we've just adopted that, and it also tells us about testing time and the depth of the assessment. Just about a week ago, we sent out to all of our school districts a listing of the schools that will be part of a 1 million student pilot testing that begins in February. February through May, we'll be doing pilot testing with about 1 million kids of a random sample to test the first 10,000 items in Smarter Balanced. And also, all schools are invited to participate if they want to. So we have a statistical sample where we invite people, but if you want to play and you're not part of that sample, let us know, and we'll make sure that you get an opportunity to see how this all works. Today, we've released our achievement level descriptors for grades 3 through 8 and high school. These are similar to the performance level descriptors that Laura described for PARCC. There's a nice blog that was released today in Education Week, so you can read about that. It's open for public comment now through January, and then we're looking to adopt those in March. Early in December, I think around the 4th or so, we will be releasing minimum specifications for hardware, operating systems, bandwidth necessary to administer our test. And I just want to make the point that while these are tests that are given online, the equipment that you need to give our assessments is much thinner than the equipment that you need to do good instruction. Let me say that again. What you're going to need to deliver, minimally to deliver our assessment, is a lot less than what students should have to learn to learn using technology. And also, we do not require one computer for every student. By our estimation, a middle school of about 600 students can take our assessment with a single computer lab of about 30 computers. So most of this is accessible in many, many of our schools. And then in mid-December, we have our validity framework is going to be adopted. The validity framework, I know that's kind of wonky and so forth and so on, but it's very important. These are the explicit declarations of the kinds of research we're going to need to do to back up the claims we're making about teaching and learning with our assessment. What we're saying about students being college and career ready, what evidence are we going to need to support that claim? And that's what a validity framework is, and it's an important part of an assessment system, and it will be a major milestone when we adopt that. I have some sample items and tasks that we don't have time to go through, so I'm going to skip through a whole lot of slides, but they'll be in the deck that you can receive. And here they are. And in order to stay within my 10 minutes, oops, I went to Excellence in Action. What did I do?
You've got to go.
Oh,
There.
good. Thank you. Your website? Oh, website was the last slide on the, Laura, help me.
All right.
All right. My slide, my deck. There we are. That's it. Okay. That's it. So it's smarterbalanced.org. So go to smarterbalanced.org, and right there are the sample items and also our achievement level descriptors that were released today. Thank you.
So clearly, the two most collaborative consortia that I've run across, where they help each other with PowerPoints. I want to make two observations about remarks that were made. Both our speakers pointed out that they're assessing different orders of magnitude, and that's reflected, of course, in the Common Core standards. But a legitimate question is why? Why different orders of magnitude? So I'm going to ask you for just a moment to envision yourself as an employer. What is it that you're looking for in an employee today that's probably different than 20 years ago? And what you're looking for is a basic core content knowledge, yes, that's critically important, but you're also looking for the ability to collaborate with fellow workers, to communicate what you're doing, to engage in the kind of creative and critical thinking that leads to innovation, to engage in self-reflection. And so that's what these assessments, and that's reflected in the Common Core, and that's what these assessments seek to pull out as much as they could. And Governor Bush talked about PISA today, and of course, what's PISA but about problem solving? So that's number one. Number two is, I couldn't help when the observation about teacher taking tests home and grading. Anybody questions the value of digital learning and the effective application of technology? If you can save a secondary school teacher from taking home 120 tests a night or papers, because now he or she has real-time data coming to them from whether it's the software or from whatever it is in technology, and now they can devote themselves to actually teaching. Think of the cost savings. Think of the return on investment from just that alone. And so that's the importance of digital learning. So now that I've got my editorial comments in, I'm blowing up the schedule. And so I'm exercising, because we're a flexible society now, aren't we? And so whatever I just told you about how we're going to divide up into questions and so on, that's gone. And so, because I think it's very important to get the folks that are going to actually be administering this, one superintendent from a Smarter Balanced state, Steve Bowen from Maine, and Tony Bennett from a PARCC state, Indiana, to talk about what they see as the issues ahead and what we need to be aware of. So who wants to go? Tony, do you want to lead off, or Steve? Okay, Steve's going to lead off from Maine.
Thank you, Governor, and I also have, oh, yeah.
Sorry, no.
All right.
I'll take my Phil Donahue.
Okay, all right. Well, I will include some laudatory remarks, but I'll get to them in a minute. So one of the things that I want to talk about from the Maine perspective is I know one of the challenges that states are confronting with this is the technology piece. And you heard a little bit that both the consortia understand that. They've done a lot of looking at where states are, what those technology needs are going to be. And it is going to be an issue for a lot of states. It's not going to be an issue for Maine, though, so good luck. It's not going to be an issue for Maine because we've been down this road for quite a while. For those of you who don't know the background, Maine has had a one-to-one laptop program in its middle schools and its high schools for going on 10 years. And so we're pretty confident that we're going to have the technology in place to do the assessment when it comes online and it's ready to go. And the reason we were able to do that is because 10 years ago, our former governor and soon-to-be U.S. Senator Angus King had something that we call a budget surplus. I don't know what this is a pretty alien concept these days, but evidently you had more revenue than you had places to spend it and had some extra money left over. I don't even know what this feels like nowadays, but and the governor decided that if Maine was going to be a competitive state in the 21st century, we needed to do something that the rest of you were not doing. And so the bet he made was really investing in digital learning and getting these laptops into our middle schools and then later into our high schools. And the way we've done that is through an RFP process. Every 4 years or so, we go out to RFP for these devices. And I want to talk a little bit about how we've done that, because we get a lot of questions as states are looking at how we're going to get the technology deployed to do these assessments. And we do have an RFP for the next round that we just put out last week. So, and I know there's potential bidders in the room, so I'm going to be very careful about what I say about this RFP, but we've done some things that I think as your states are thinking about how to do this, there are a few things to keep in mind. One of the things is that Governor King had this great admonition that when this thing got put in place, he wanted what he said was one throat to choke. And what he meant by that is he didn't want one vendor providing the laptops, one vendor providing the software, one vendor providing the networks, and all of that kind of stuff. He wanted one vendor to do the whole thing. So if you take a look at our RFP, the new one that's out, and the ones that we've done previously, you'll see that we asked for a comprehensive package. So we not only have the devices, but also the networks, the support, the warranties, the cases, the extra batteries. I mean, it's a very, very thorough ask that we're asking of the vendors. And we also structured it in a way where we didn't say we want a device that does this specific thing. For instance, a device that's going to be used to do these assessments. Instead, what we say is here are the teaching and learning problems that we want you vendors to help us try to solve. So if you look at the RFP, it does have some technical specs, and we want the machines to be able to do certain things and have certain capacities, and the networks and the rest of it. But most of it is here's what we're trying to do with teaching and learning. How is your solution going to help us with that? And that's, I think, has been very helpful to us in how we think about how to use this technology. One of the other things to remember, though, is with all due respect to the consortia and all the testing industry folks that are here, most people don't like standardized testing. Kids don't like it. Parents don't. I know, this is shocking to hear. But if you as policymakers intend to go to a legislative appropriations committee and say we need more money to buy computers and fit out computer labs to do standardized testing, you're going to hear crickets, I think, because that's not enough of a pitch. And so here's where the laudatory remarks come in. This needs to be, this is an opportunity, I think, to invest in technology that's going to transform our schools. And it can't simply be about we've got to have some extra computers around in order to do these assessments. It has to be about the very thing that Governor Wise, and Governor Bush have been talking about for the last few years about digital learning and its ability to transform our schools into a really student-centered system. And we've tried to do that in Maine. I think we've made some headway in places. It's not perfect. We've got some districts where the implementation of these devices is pretty basic, but we've got other districts that are doing really great stuff. And so, I would encourage you to think broadly as you're thinking about this opportunity to invest in technology, to think about where you could go with digital learning. And if you haven't, and I don't know if Tom Vander Ark's in here, I know he's here, but I don't know if he's in the room. Everybody in this room, and he didn't pay me to say this, but everybody in this room should read his book, Getting Smart About Digital Learning, to get some sense of where this is going. And I think if you think about, can we make this technology investment that we're most likely going to have to make as part of preparing for these assessments, and we make that about how do we use technology to do the very kinds of digital learning things that both governors have been talking about, I think that's a way that we can go to our parents, that we can go to our kids in a lot of instances, that we can go to our policymakers and say, this is not simply about a next generation of assessments. It's about a next generation of teaching and learning, and about our schools being different than they've ever been before. So we're very excited about this opportunity. And like I said, Maine's done a lot of work around this. We've done these technology buys. The new RFP does have a multi-state initiative in it that we could talk to you about. Jeff Maus, the program director, is here from Maine, who's done a ton of work on this for the last 10 years. So we certainly stand ready to support you if you've got questions about these kinds of things, because we've been down this road and I think we've had some success. But it's a very, very exciting time. Not just that we're going to have next generation assessments, but we really have an opportunity to transform this entire system with technology and the way we do this work. The assessments are going to be a core part of that, but we really have the opportunity to change teaching and learning in fundamental ways. So I'm very excited about that.
Thank you for having us today, Governor. I'm probably the worst person in the world to give you this advice, because I'm going to talk about how we approach this from a political campaign standpoint. So as we've done the post-mortem here since November, and I say that, and I really don't say it to be funny, I'm dead serious about this. We have to think about Common Core and the implementation of the Common Core state standard assessments in terms of messaging, first and foremost. In the room with us today is Senator Rich Crandall from Arizona, huge champion for the Common Core. An incredible champion for the Common Core. And I think that's the first message, is we have to preserve the Common Core in our states. Frankly, there is a real, I believe, kind of this opinion out there that this is all going to be just fine, and you need to understand there is a very strong groundswell of opposition to the simple idea of the Common Core as a set of standards. So the first thing we have to do if we're going to get to the Common Core state standard assessments is we have to make sure we preserve the Common Core state standards. And we can't lose sight of that. And again, it's about messaging. It's about messaging. And I want to talk about messaging as it applies to Common Core state standards and the assessments in really three areas. The first of those is, how do we message this to the public? And you heard Steve say this, and Steve is exactly right. I refer to this as transformation. And it's transformation in four areas. Transformation in teaching, transformation in learning, transformation in assessments, and transformation in results. We have to message that the Common Core and the Common Core state standard assessments will create transformation in the way students are taught, the skills necessary for teachers to teach, how students learn, how we assess, and what the results will be. And if we are successful in that, and we're successful in messaging that to our general public, you will get a tremendous amount of buy-in for not only the Common Core, but the movement against standardized testing. Because no one minds that transformation occurs, that it improves teaching, improves learning, improves assessment, and improves results. So I would say to you that's the first audience, is your general public, and it's around transformation. Your second audience is inside the State House. And inside the State House, we haven't talked about this yet on the panel, but we have a very difficult discussion to have, and that is around common cut scores and costs. And I would submit to you that you have to use your messaging from the public to message to your legislators about selling the idea that we are going to have common cut scores and the cost of these assessments. Now, in Indiana, we're fortunate. The pure cost to cost for us actually goes down. Okay, so we are very fortunate. It won't be, now that Senator Kenley, Representative Baining, that doesn't mean we want anything cut. But again, that's a reality. There are states that are going to spend 2, maybe 3 times as much. And again, you have to message transformation to your legislators. The third place I think you have to message is actually to schools. And that is about implementation. And I think Steve hit the nail right on the head. The implementation is if teachers are ready to teach to these standards, and it will change the way they teach. If they're ready to teach to these standards, we have to be ready to assess these standards. And Steve has hit the nail right on the head about the technology piece. Now in Indiana, and I know PARCC helped with this, we actually did something that Governor Bush kind of talked about. You heard Governor Bush talk about setting those standards high and keep the standards high. What we did was a pretty simple recipe. We said, guess what? We're going to assess in 2014-15 online. Didn't talk about how much money we were going to give them to do it. We set it out there. We set the expectation out there. And in 2011, 66% of our students, grades 3 through 8, were assessed online. In 2012, 100% of our 3-8 students will be assessed online. And we did that without setting aside a ton of money. We did it by setting the bar. We did it by helping with load testing. We did it by helping with messaging. And guess what? Our schools produced. So I would maintain to you that if we keep a focus on the messaging right now, we message to the public, we message in the State House, and we message in schools, we will get this implemented. And it will truly transform the way kids are taught, the way kids learn, the way kids are assessed, and the way we look at results. And I think, Dr. Daggett, didn't you one time say that assessment drives reform? See, I did read one of your books. I'm going to push you a little bit on that because I don't really anymore believe assessment drives reform. I believe results-driven accountability drives reform. Until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, human beings stay the same and schools are run by human beings. So that is why these results are so important. And because we will, again, have to message to our public, as Governor Wise mentioned. And I think the easiest way to look at this is look at your college proficiency scores on your SAT and ACTs, the percentage of your students that are truly college ready, and you will see that there is a gap that we're going to have to bridge, and that's another messaging piece to your public. So again, I think the preservation today in the short term starts with messaging as we continue to move through the assessment development phase so we can prepare ourselves for 14-15.
Great. We've heard both how the consortia are working and as well as some of the practical implications. Questions? I have some, but I think it's time. Giselle.
I'm a proponent of...
Yep. Yeah, we have microphone one there. Is there some others, John?
I'm more than a proponent. I'm a true believer in blended learning. And and I echo what Stephen said about this being an enormous opening of the doors to really transforming the way our children learn. And what worries me is what I heard from the people who represent the consortia, because what I heard was grades. There are no grades in blended learning. There's just wherever you go, wherever you are, you just keep going. And a very specific 3 testing periods, one of which doesn't really count and 2 of which do. Whereas in the blended learning space, children are being tested continuously. They're constantly getting reaffirmed or put into the direction in which they need to go in order to get to where they need to be. And I'm not hearing a room for that in the assessments that you're building. And I speak for a number of my colleagues who feel very strongly about blended learning. We're very worried that by setting the kinds of standards you're putting, I mean, the framework that you're using for the assessments, you're closing the door to the potential of blended learning, which is not what you're describing.
Laura or Joe?
Thank you. And that is actually, thank you for the comment. And that's an area of focus that, as the consortium, we have been picking up and acting upon as well. We formed a performance-based learning task force, which is, essentially a blended learning task force, and are looking at ways that we can enhance our item pool to include in that interim space that happens throughout the year, include some secure items so that students can be assessed with some fidelity, that that there's kind of no monkey business going on around the assessments. Right now, with regard to, sadly, because we wrote the proposal at the time we wrote the proposal to get the grants that we got to meet federal accountability requirements, kind of wasn't in the territory that we were doing. But we are right now looking at funding opportunities. There are a number of foundations that are very interested in this as well, and we do look forward to it. That opens the door, in a way, to a larger comment I'd like to make, and that is that neither Laura nor I had the opportunity to talk about the fact that we're both engaged kind of in Common Core Assessment 1.0. And neither of us will be able to meet the goals and the dreams that we desire to have around really exploring what technology can do in assessment, how we can assess in real time, how students are interacting within the classroom. These are stages 2 and 3 beyond where this first target is.
And then I'd love to have the two superintendents, because I know both of you have been involved in competency-based advancement, and what is the tension?
Well, so I appreciate the comment as well. And the thing I'd add is that I think, and I agree with Joe's point that we're sort of in phase 1 and phase 2 is still to come, but there are several aspects of both the Smarter Balanced Assessment and the PARCC assessment that lend themselves quite well to the kind of competency-based approach that we all want to get to. So first of all is the digital aspect of it, the fact that these will be computer delivered. They can be much more flexible. Students ideally could take those tests when they're ready. There'll be multiple administrations of the tests, so it's not just sit down at the end of the year. Some students are on block schedules, so there'll be assessments for students who are on block schedules. There's a much greater performance-based aspect of these assessments, which really gets at some of the deeper learning and the blended learning aspects that you mentioned. And in the case of both consortia, there is a heavy emphasis on the diagnostic pieces, and the diagnostic pieces can be quite flexible, can be delivered in the moment when students are ready, as teachers identify their readiness so that they can go on to the next topic. Is that a perfect approach to the blended learning or competency-based piece? Not yet, but it's opening the door and starting down the path of a system that will, in the end, be much more student-focused, much more flexible, and really be able to meet students where they are. Achieve is working, as Joe mentioned, on developing a competency-based framework that will come out next summer and provide some recommendations and some ideas for how the assessment design can be tweaked over time as it moves into the second phase to be a little bit more focused on that element.
Steve or Tony?
I would just echo what Joe said. I mean, we brought this concern back months ago. We've done a lot of work in Maine around competency-based learning, proficiency-based learning, whatever you want to call it. We've got school districts that have more or less gotten rid of age-based grade levels. Kids are moving as they master learning outcomes. And so we know that the consortia are sort of, unfortunately, locked into this federal paradigm that we're locked into, that we're going to, we're going to have tests every year, and we're still locked into that school calendar, we're still locked into the age-based grade levels. I mean, we're operating under that. But certainly the work that we've done, and the Smarter Balanced Consortium team has been terrific about this, of figuring out how can we plant some seeds here where we can ultimately get to, Giselle, where I think we all understand we need to go, whether it's through a blended learning model with digital learning, or even just proficiency-based learning in the classroom, where teachers are adjusting and moving kids around and doing that just-in-time instruction. So I think we're going to be able to plant some seeds as we're building this out, and I would concur with both of the consortia leaders that this is coming along. But I think until we move past the umbrella that we're living under, where this mindset that we're going to put all these kids together when they're 5 years old, we're going to lock them in an age-based cohort, we're going to roll them down the assembly line, all at the same time. I mean, as long as we continue to think of school in that kind of a fashion, that industrial factory batch processing model, we're going to still be locked into some of that. But I think we're making some headway.
There's not a lot to add to that, Governor, other than to say, we're in a position now we can't let perfect get in the way of good.
That's right.
And that's a kind of a callous, hard thing to have to say today. But we have to kind of take that approach. No one's a bigger fan of competency-based learning than I am. But I also understand that we have limited resources, limited timeline, and those things generally drive the output. So that's kind of where we are. I will tell you, as one of the state chiefs driving PARCC, this is a discussion every PARCC meeting. Yeah. And we have to evolve. We have to evolve. No, it's not locked in. I'm not locked in, Giselle.
Well, I know you're not.
But it seems to me there's also a situation here where demand from the states can also put wind behind these sails. So please look at how each of our states handles advancement. Most of us are still locked into a 180-day seat time requirement. I'm not going to fight with you fight with folks on the 180 days. I think learning's a 24/7 experience anyhow. But I will fight on whether or not you get a credit. The only way you get a credit is partially determined by sitting in a seat for 180 days. And so there are states that are moving forward. I think New Hampshire has gone this way. Have you all done it, Steve, in Maine, towards a much more competency-based advancement? So if we really want to make sure that the consortia are responding to the states, and the states are on their governing boards, then we've got to make sure that the states are sending that message loud and clear as well. Yes, sir.
The question that deals with the logistics of running 600 students through a 30-computer lab, could you give us some detail on how that's possible? Maybe some reaction from the other panelists as to how they're looking at that logistics?
Don't spend a whole lot of time on it, but we have very wide windows, knowing that there was not a lot of equipment capacity out there. So the testing window for the end of the year is battery of assessments is about 12 weeks long. So, you kind of just do some back of the envelope of a 30-computer lab, how many students can it handle in a given day, with probably 3 testing sessions of about 50 to 60 minutes each. How many testing sessions do we need? How do you move it through? And the arithmetic works out. And if you want to see me after the session, we can trade cards, and I can kind of send you the spreadsheet if you'd like.
Anyone else want to comment on? Yeah.
Let's talk about messaging with that. I mean, I always message it this way. How many people are hitting ATM machines as we speak? We can figure this out. I mean, if people can get money out of machines all across the country and all around the world instantaneously, we should be able to figure this out. And again, it goes to messaging, and you have to message this in a way the public understands, the way it's easily understood and sold in the State House, and the way schools need to sell it to their communities.
Yes.
I've got 2 quick and easy questions. One is, what are the 3 essential bullet point differences between the 2 assessment systems, PARCC and Smarter Balanced? And 2 is, are career readiness and college readiness the same level of readiness and skills and cut scores, or are they different?
When somebody says easy questions, that's always the setup. All right, who's jumping in?
We know two.
Go with those
Okay.
two, and I'll think of the third one.
There are clearly two. The clear difference is that the Smarter Balanced Consortium has a computer adaptive design, and the PARCC Consortium, while computer-based and computer-delivered, is a fixed form. So that's one key difference. And there are reasons for that are philosophical, that, you know, the governing board of each consortia chose to do that differently. The other is around high school. The Smarter Balance, I don't want to speak for you, but the Smarter Balance, but I can finish your sentences. The Smarter Balance Consortium is putting forward an end of domain test at grade 11 that will cover the high school content, ending at that point, sort of the accrual and the aggregation of that content. PARCC is, as I said, moving to a very different approach, which is a set of end of course assessments, English 9, English 10, English 11, and then in mathematics, Math 1, Math 2, Math 3, and another sequence, which is Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. And the reason for that is, again, philosophical, the sense that providing information back to teachers who are directly responsible for teaching the content in that course is incredibly valuable as teachers get to understand the impact they've had on their students and can adjust instruction accordingly. So it's really focused on that instruction in the classroom. The third difference, we share a lot of things.
Performance levels that are five versus 4. We have probably focused a little bit more on translation issues, and I think PARCC is focused more on first grade, second grade.
Could you translate for me what translation is?
The kinds of supports that we will make available for second language youngsters,
I see.
and whether those are translated assessments or glossaried assessments, and how we're going to do those. We requested and got some additional resources from the Department of Education to explore that. PARCC got additional resources to explore first and second grade diagnostic materials. So that's another difference. Let me add to that, though. Many people may wonder, why are there two consortia? What's the value of that? This is a great example. If there were only one consortium and it did not work out, you would not know if it was a bad idea or just a bad implementation. But with two consortia, I can guarantee you we are learning from each other, we are competing with each other, we are trying to do better than the other one, and we're collaborating. And so this is a great instance of competition being a good thing and keeping us on our toes. And I don't know that it would be a good thing if only one consortium had gotten all that money that we're both sharing. I don't think we would come up with as good a product as the two. So,
Steve or Tony, any thoughts? Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, was there a second? Oh, I'm sorry. Second question. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
who knows?
Yeah.
For some careers, yes. I mean, being an attorney is a career, and so you go to vocational school. We happen to call law school, and so there are some. I'm convinced that there are some non-college careers where the cut score is at exactly the same place for preparedness. There are some non-college careers where you probably need more than you need in some to be a credit-bearing student. And some recent work by NAGB, the National Assessment Governing Board that governs NAEP, bears that out, that they took a careful look at the NAEP cut scores and how they stand against college readiness and how they stand against, I think, 5 careers, and the careers are kind of all over the place. This is something we need to learn a whole lot more about.
The only thing I'd add is I guess differing a little bit with you, my colleague, that we're really focused on measuring the Common Core. And the Common Core is very clear about where it sets the bar in terms of readiness for college and readiness for career, as essentially providing a foundation for students to have as many choices and as many options open to them. And so it's very clear that there is a consistent and common set of knowledge and skills that allow students to have equal opportunity and access to whatever path they choose. That's different from saying that every college credit-bearing course requires the same amount of content, knowledge, and skills. We all know that's not the case, but in terms of where PARCC is going, it will set college and career-ready cut scores course that are based in the content of the standards and say the extent to which students have mastered those content and skills so that they're ready to make good decisions and have good options.
Tony, did you want to?
I want to talk a little bit about, because I want to say in simple terms as possible what I believe college ready is, and that's the ability of a student to leave high school, begin college work without the need for remediation. Okay? Case closed. That's the biggest waste of money in state today.
That's right.
Is the fact that we send, Governor Daniels, you'll hear him tomorrow. I hope he says this to you. I consider the fact that we send students to go to college not prepared a breach of warranty. And that's straight from Mitch Daniels. It's a breach of warranty from the K-12 system. And so I think that's number one. So when we talk about what college ready is, I think it is the ability of a student to leave our high school prepared for college credit-bearing work without the need for remediation. Two, career ready, and this really goes to the work of the states around career pathways and what states are doing to develop those pathways that allow students to move from pathway to pathway or move from a job ready to college, again, without the need for remediation. So to Joe's point, it has a tremendous amount to do with flexibility in giving students the most options possible.
And the definition of college, we've got to think, is pretty broad. I mean, I think we need to, the operating presumption from us anyway, is that every kid is going to need some type of post-secondary learning experience, no matter where they're going. I mean, it's just the nature of the economy. So, what is that collection of skills and knowledge that they're going to need no matter what they're doing? Because they're going to need some type of post-secondary learning and skills in order to succeed.
Governor, if I can add one thing. How many of you have heard one of the, I'm not going to say a name. Have heard one of the conservative think tanks or your conservative constituents say, we're dumbing down our standards? Show of hands. We're dumbing down our standards. Now, I want you to think for a moment about Kentucky's data. We're dumbing down our standards, but our students did poor. Okay? And when we talk about college and career, it again, the easiest way to prepare for this is just take a look at your college proficiency rates on your two current secondary assessments. This is not dumbing down standards. The problem is we haven't raised our standards to the point where our students are prepared for college credit-bearing work without remediation and successful career entry.
Tony and Steve, one of you alluded to this. ACT, each year, of course, administers its college entrance exam. And the last year, only 25% of students taking that exam were deemed college ready in all 4 subject areas. 25%. The number, unfortunately, becomes even more stark for children of color. And so that's the existing picture. And so clearly, all I'm saying, Tony, all I'm saying is amen. Tell it, brother, tell it. Because what that means is that there's a need to raise those standards. The second part that's, I think, so important that you made, and Steve as well, is this isn't just about whether or not a student is entering college the semester after or the 3 months after graduating from high school. It's about their ability to handle post-secondary learning at some point in their career. So and yes, there is still a lot being fleshed out on, okay, what's the career-ready side of this mean, college-ready more readily defined. But it's about making sure that all of our students are able to engage in some kind of post-secondary learning regardless of where they get that experience. Yes?
Okay, having said everything that you've just said, I'm one of those folks in one of these legislative houses, okay? And I didn't get good messaging. The first time this come in front of our state of Washington, we weren't convinced Common Core was a good thing. And then I came to this conference last year at this time and started going, aha, okay. So now I understand the intent. But from what I'm gathering from the surveys that have been done by a number of legislative organizations, the states are starting to say, how in the heck do we pay for this? Where do we start? Our rural schools don't even have access to online or technology yet. And many of our schools and our budgets, we're cutting online digital learning now. We're fighting to keep that. If you've got ideas about where do we start with the foundation so we can fund this, rather than having states start to backtrack. And my fear is we're going to lose ground rather than gain it. I think you'll figure the assessment part out. I think we've got a lot of smart people working on that, but we got to get there, and that's the area I
Thank
need
you for an
help.
incredibly important question. Let me turn to the superintendents.
First of all, take a look at your own internal flexibilities. I'll give you a quick example of one of the things we did in Indiana. We have a textbook, we use textbook reimbursement. So in statute, thanks to Representative Baining, Chairman Baining, and Chairman Cruz, who are with us today, we changed the definition of a textbook to include a laptop computer or tablet. Very simple. Okay, it was a very small, right, Bob, couple words, and guess what we did? We gave schools the opportunity to put technology in the hands of their students with funds they currently have. So they didn't have to go out and adopt bound textbooks. They could enter into this space pretty quickly. So I think number one thing you have to do is first look at your own internal flexibilities that you can provide through statute or rulemaking, very simply. And I think you do that before you start looking at how much new money you have, because I think you can mitigate that damage by giving yourself more internal flexibility.
I would say the other thing is partnerships. I mean, we're asking our schools to do a hell of a lot, and they can't do it all. And you know, we've got high-speed internet in every single one of our schools. We've got broadband in every school. And we didn't do that just inside the schools world. We did that by building partnerships with our library system, with our university system, with the state government, with OIT, which is the state agency that does IT. We built a partnership where we were able to figure out how to provide this broadband to all our libraries, all our schools, all our university campuses, because we built a partnership. We didn't try to do it in silos. So you got to build those partnerships. And to build those partnerships, you got to get this call to arms. And that's what Tony's talking about. This is about telling the truth. I mean, we've got to confront the fact that a lot of us have been lying to our families about how well these kids are doing. And we've got to start telling the truth about this. And we've got to start building partnerships with the business community and just really building that, and you heard about it from at lunch today. You got to get that, the sense that this is a mission that we're on. We got to do this. And then you can build those partnerships that are going to provide those resources that are going to get you where you need to go. I mean, we couldn't have done the one-to-one program in Maine for 10 years without a lot of partnerships and a lot of work with folks outside our door, with higher ed, with tons of people. That's the only way we're going to get this done. But to build those partnerships, you've got to get that. We've got to decide collectively, we're not going back. We can't fail this.
And Tony and Steve, isn't this also about, this isn't about simply layering on.
No.
If you just slap a netbook on top of a textbook, you failed. This is about re-engineering how you're delivering education. And so often when I hear, that was a very legitimate question. It's very difficult now. We're going from aspiration to implementation. I'm going to do a country song on that one day. When you're in the nonprofit world, you're searching for all you can get. But as we move to that implementation, yes, there will be capital investments, but what will it offset? For instance, if you're spending, as Steve and Tony talked about, how are you going to change the allocation you're giving? I hope you're not going to buy textbooks at the same time you're buying digital content. We spend somewhere about $17 billion a year in this country on largely ineffective professional development. So now are we able, via technology, to create communities of practice for teachers that extend across school lines, district lines, state lines? And so what in each instance are we offsetting? That's what I think is the opportunity before us. And the assessment consortia provide the first one, and I'll give Tony and Steve the final words.
I will say this. Legislators, this is a discussion, and I think this is the root of the discussion as it applies to you and money, is that this highlights the challenge that we have in states. I think it happens at the federal government. I think it happens at the local level, of really putting fiscal policy and education policy together. For far too long in state houses, we've talked about the budget, and again, with great respect to our two legislators, Indiana's no different than the other 49 states. You know, we have a long budget session getting ready to start, and I maintain this is what will happen. We'll close 12 guys in a room in the 4th floor of the State House the last day of the session. When the white smoke comes out of the chimney, they'll say, "Hark, we know how to fund education." While Bob and Dennis have been doing their work, and they say, "Now we know what it takes to educate kids well," and, you know, they really don't talk a lot. And if we're really going to crack this nut to what Governor Wise just said, we have to, in the State House, start putting our education policy and fiscal policy discussions together so that we start paying for what we want to do.
Steve, anything, closing
Yeah,
remarks?
just quickly, you know, Maine does pretty well when you look at our NAEP scores. I mean, we rank pretty highly. But I wasn't on the job very long before I had a meeting with the president of our community college system. He said, you know, 54% of the kids coming into our system from your high schools need remediation. And those are the kids that we accept into the community college. That doesn't count the kids who applied and they didn't let in. And you think of, and I said, well, what's that costing you? He said, that's about $1 million a year for the system and $1 million a year for the families of these kids who thought that those kids were getting an education in high school that were going to prepare them. So there's $2 million right there that is available for us to put into these kinds of initiatives. So we've got to find, I mean, the digital learning stuff, the customized learning, being able to have a kid learn when they're ready to learn and not have half the kids waiting because they're bored and half the kids struggling to keep up because you're able to target instruction using these high-tech assessments. I mean, there's a lot of places we can go, but we got to have the courage to do it.
It's 2014 or 15, it's coming. Let's get ready. Thank you. Let's thank this incredible panel. And thank you.